Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started and what are they doing to stay there? And today I have another special guest. Her name is Emily Watson. She's the Chief Operating Officer at Landtower Residential. And Emily, hey, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How you doing?
Doing great. I appreciate you allowing me to be here.
Of course. Yes. I actually like to start off the podcast kind of reflecting on like how I met my guests or came into, they came into my path. And for you, we got introduced by a former podcast guest, Denise Snow.
Yes. I'm thankful to Denise for our introduction.
She is absolutely amazing. So I'm so glad she connected us because we're going to talk today about leadership. We're going to talk about the employee experience. We're going to talk a little leadership development. But before we get started, I would love for you to share just a highlight of Landtower Residential and how do you serve your customers?
We are a developer and an owner of multifamily, so apartments. And we manage everything that we own. So we actually have the privilege to be able to put housing over people's heads. We consider it an honor, really, to be able to understand that our residents have meaningful conversations around their kitchen tables, that they are deciding whether or not they're going to start a family or maybe move and accept a job. So we take that honor pretty you just really can't do something better than allow people to have that I'm home feeling, and that we are in charge of that. We have about 13,000 residents that we serve, with about double that actually in our pipeline. So exciting things at Atlanta in the Sunbelt states mainly. So we're Texas, Florida, and Raleigh and Charlotte, North Carolina.
Well, relocation, I'll tell you, you just mentioned about doubling the size. I mean, relocation has a seismic shift ever since the pandemic. And of course, I'm in relocation. We help with the household goods moves, but I also talk to different customers about apartment and rental. And it is unbelievable what's going on in the rental market. I saw just yesterday, someone had put out there, my son was actually is in the process of getting another apartment. And he was telling me, he said, just a few years ago, the apartment I got for $1,100 is now $1,500 today. It has been incredible and it continues to increase. What's going on there?
There is definitely housing shortage. And in the Sunbelt states, we have been the recipient of people wanting to move from some of those gateway cities into our homes. And forever there is the NIMBY, not in my backyard, which I think has really hurt our housing. So I think there's a little bit of I don't want apartments near me, who's in there, there's crime and so forth. And really, we house the folks that are empty nesters. We house the teachers and the firefighters and the folks, and there's not enough homes. We can't build them fast enough. So I know that's not always going to be the case, that there will be, we don't always get that supply and demand just right. But if we can talk our legislators into, and really the local municipalities, to help us understand that we are very much a part of the community and want to serve as such, I think that we can really lower that stigma to be able to add the homes that, frankly, everybody everywhere in the United States needs. So it is supply and demand. It is simple economics 101, that the more housing there is, the less competitive the rates will be.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's almost like everything is just aligning right now. So we're in the summertime, so that's peak moving season. And just a couple of years ago, of course, with the pandemic, everything kind of slowed down, almost like a pause. And now today, it seems like everybody's needing to move. And what's happening is because there's no housing available, no apartment available. We're filling up our warehouses now, and now all the warehouses are full. It has really been crazy. And of course, we're in a great state. Everybody wants to move to Texas, and of course, the Southeast, Florida, and in those areas. But it has been incredible.
Yeah, it won't last forever. Certainly, what comes up must go down. But we have an associate that's transferring to us from Seattle, and went to pick up his U-Haul, and there wasn't one available. Like nobody had turned it in. He was just like, I don't know what to do. He eventually found one, but it was a bit of a sign of the times of, yeah, the relocation world is busy just as well. So.
Yeah, it's busy. The housing market, all of that, it's incredible. And you're right. We're going to get to a point to where we find that, that I don't know, you can call it a plateau where everything kind of levels out. But hey, I want to talk to you today about some of the things I mentioned earlier, leadership. I want to talk about employee experience. But first, I would love to hear the Emily Watson story. Like, where did you grow up, and how in the world did you get into leadership?
A bit of a boring story. I actually grew up in Dallas, and went to school at North Texas. And I
Go
was
Mean
very,
Green.
yes, yes, proud. Um, I was very proud of my first apartment that I found, and my mom drove up to it and she was like, "Oh, honey, all right, you go ahead and go to orientation, and I will fix this by the time you get out." So she did. So she found another apartment community for us that she felt more comfortable with us in. And my roommate said, "Oh, they need some help over the summer. Doesn't that sound like fun?" I'm like, yeah, we get to meet all of our neighbors. So, and literally that is how it started. It just got in my blood. So I went from leasing apartments in college to assistant manager to a property manager position. And one thing I love about this industry is that there's so many industries within the industry. So I went into a training role. I've served in an asset manager capacity, went back into operations side for VP, and then eventually into the COO role that I'm in now. But there's so much, and I tell people that if you don't have ADD coming into it, you probably will get it once you're here, because it's fascinating. People are fascinating. So I just fell in love with being able to kind of watch people that I worked with grow into the roles and find what their passion and their calling is, and being able to know that somewhere along the way I helped flip that switch, and it ended up being my passion, kind of my own personal mission, if you will.
I love how you talked about helping people grow, because I want to talk about that, because I have a couple of things I want to talk about. But before that, here you are. You didn't start where you're at today. I mean, as a high performer in your leadership role, you grew it. I mean, you talked earlier about your first apartment, and then you become a leasing agent and all of that. What I like to ask this question: was there a moment when you found your lane, when you like found your calling, your purpose? Was there a moment where it just clicked, or have there just been moments on your journey?
Yeah, well, there's been lots of moments for sure, and lots of mentors that I've been really fortunate just to say, "Hey, you're over here. You might you might want to get over here." But I would say, well, I was asked as a property manager to actually to teach sales class, and I'd never taught anything before, and I did find a lot of satisfaction in that. And
Hmm.
then the gal that had taught that specific class was doing a leadership class kind of for a select few. And in that, we wrote our personal mission statement. And that was probably 25 years ago. I'll say 20 plus years ago, so I don't date myself. And it's stuck. I mean, to be able to be that young, to kind of know what filled my soul and then be able to make a career out of it, I do think was probably a little divine intervention, frankly. But yeah, we wrote to ignite the passion in myself and others through discernment, clarification, and leadership in a Christ-like manner. And that was literally 25 years ago. And whenever I feel like, oh, that wasn't a fulfilling day, or maybe I look back and go, there wasn't as many wins in that column, it's usually because I was off of, discerning and leading, and, helping people do what they do best and seeing what their passions are. So I would say writing that, wasn't necessarily an aha moment, because it was pretty easy to get my mission statement down on paper, but I would say that it has definitely helped pave the path on where I'm spending my time and efforts. So.
I love everything you said about that. I'm curious about your mission statement. Is that a practice that you continue today as you help, as you support others on your team, as you help them grow? I'm just curious. Do you try to help others write a mission statement?
No, it was a class. It was a Franklin Covey class that
Oh, yes, I
um,
took that.
it was
Okay.
great. Yeah, it was called well, Focus, and then What Matters Most, and then so it has evolved. I still teach the class that kind of goes back to that today, but they did take writing your mission statement out of it. So that's kind of a bummer. But on my one-on-ones with my specific direct reports, we do talk a lot about it, like
Mm,
what feeds your soul, what do you,
mm,
because I just think when you're where you're supposed to be, you're good at it, and you keep wanting to do it more and more. So it benefits them. And we've had to have conversations with people to say, I don't think this is what you're supposed to be doing. When you step into the classroom, you really come alive. Let's get you into a position that I think you're really built to be doing on a day in, day out basis. So, it definitely is part of the DNA now. It comes up in natural conversations,
yeah.
but I'm not using it in a classroom format like I was before.
Yeah, I've had several guests on the show that have talked about purpose, and one of the things that I've heard in the past as well is purpose is fluid. And for me, I remember going through the exercises early in my career, but also when I published my last book, I wrote down what I felt like my mission was today, and that was to move leaders to inspire and change the workplace. And I do that through whether I'm in, relocation or speaking, but that mission, that purpose, that really helps us like drive everything, right? Drive our conversations as we're talking to different people, or when we're making decisions about what we want to do, like for the day, or when we're blocking out our calendars for the week, right?
For sure, for sure. And the class still talks to that, like who
Mm,
are the people that you affect in your different roles that you serve, and what do
mm,
you want those people to say about you, and then
mm.
how will you take those relationships from ordinary to extraordinary? What's one thing you can do this week to really make an impact there?
So you mentioned earlier you had some great mentors. I'm curious. Do you have a couple you want to share? Like, what was it that made them such a great mentor?
I've had several, and all of them had candor.
Mm,
So I'm super grateful. I mean, I was young, and frankly, it gives me patience with some of our younger folks to go, oh, wow, I had some mentors that really gave me some leeway, and I should probably pay that forward a little bit. Um, my first manager leasing apartments, and great advice for a young person, but I still use it today, even with my daughter, gave me the advice of, honey, you got to say it nice, but if you can't say it nice, get it said.
say it nice, but if you can't say it nice, get it said.
Make sure you get it
I
said.
love that.
Yeah. And that's so true. I mean, and some of my best mentors have been very frank, very direct, very to the point of, you kind of got the mom look or the dad look of, maybe that wasn't hitting the mark there. And that's how I grew along the way. And I'm super appreciative that they trusted me with the direct kind of feedback that they had, and that they were willing to help me grow in my career. So that's a common thread, but many of them, I have so many phrases that I use on a day-to-day basis, whether it's, try to say it nice, get it said, or you gotta leave them a graceful exit,
Mm,
just one of my other mentors that say, you don't have to be right. You don't have to hold somebody's head down to the mat. You can leave them a graceful exit,
mm.
and they still get the point, and they'll do better for you going forward.
If you are listening right now, you need to get out your pen and your journal and take notes. There is so much good here. I appreciate you sharing that. Hey, let me let's talk leadership here. And I always like to ask my guests, if someone said, "Hey, Emily, what is leadership to you?" How would you respond to that?
I think you have to always start knowing that it is your honor to be able to leave the person that you're working with in a
Mm,
better place than they were before. So, whether that means that you take them from negative productivity to maybe baseline, or you take them from a baseline to really hitting it out of the park. But your role is to meet them where they are, and then meet them in a place. And I think that's why I like the training roles, because I think it did teach me that everybody learns differently. And I had an executive coach tell me one time to say, you have a strong personality and it can come across, really people will be intimidated by it. It's not their job to get comfortable with you. It is your job to embrace them and dance. So knowing that no matter where they are, leadership is, I need to find the language that will reach them. I need to find my body language that will reach them. I need to find what's important to them. So we can kind of all get there, but everybody's going to get there a little bit differently, and that's okay. And that's kind of the beauty of the fabric of an organization.
That is so good. Oh my gosh. That is what I would probably look at as like the law of connection, right? You have to find ways to connect with them. And I love that, because you're delivering something that is going to help them. It's just trying to figure out how can you connect. I posted something today, and it basically was I was just reflecting on how I learned and I was inspired so much by all of the different people that have, like, you could say trained me, but like speakers. I'd go to these conferences, people that just inspired me, and they inspired me through storytelling. And now I've become one of those storytellers. It's just really, it's fascinating, but whenever you are able to inspire or connect with someone, it inspires them in a way, and you just never know where that's going to take them, right?
Right. Exactly. Got to feed their passion.
Yes, feed their passion. I love it. Hey, let me ask you this. I know that we've been through a lot over the last few years. I mean, a lot of highs and lows. I'm just curious if you lead any differently today than you did just a few years ago, just because of the pandemic, whether you're doing more virtual or just anything differently.
I will say we offer more training opportunities. I don't know necessarily if that is because of the pandemic, and we didn't realize this, but there was a survey that was taken of the Gen X. So this is the 24 and younger generation. So these are the folks that have just recently joined us in their probably first job right out of college. And I believe it was a Deloitte survey, and they said that they are willing to take a job of equal pay if they had more training opportunities. Right?
Yes.
And at the time, we didn't know this, but we offered certification. We offered to pay for any of our industry certifications, anybody that was interested in signing up and going to either National Apartment Association or their local and so forth, and getting some of the designations. I expected 10% of our workforce to take us up on it, over 30% of our workforce took us up on it to get a certification, and it blew. Then once we saw the survey, I was like, okay, now this makes sense. So we love the fact that they're willing to invest in themselves, and we're certainly very happy to invest in their education, because obviously that's a no-brainer for us. But to the amount, so now that we know that that's their passion, we definitely are beating their drum and holding them up for their accomplishments when they're graduating from those designation process. So I wasn't doing that prior to the pandemic. During the pandemic, a lot of our residents were home, and a lot of those mental health issues, where they're just kind of, everybody's going stir crazy and in each other's hair a bit, and and they're always home. So our staff, we've always staffed our properties kind of the same, but that was an extra element. And we threw a block party to say, let's get out of the apartments, and we gave each property You could apply for a $1,500 moment on us, because we, again, we find our purpose through people are living with us and big moments are happening under our roofs, whether you're having a baby or whatnot. So you could apply, or you could nominate one of your neighbors for this moments. And it was probably one of the coolest, most gratifying things for our teams, that they really got to put the human side back, because there were moments of frustration of like, oh my gosh, this lady won't leave me alone, or they want their filter changed every 2 weeks, or things that maybe they weren't experiencing before. But the block parties really be able, it just kind of got everybody. It is a neighborhood, and it is about community, and it is about connection. So that was pretty cool from the pandemic standpoint. We did it kind of based off of that, but I think the rewards went far more reaching than what we had anticipated.
I love that. Big moments, community and connection. As you're talking, Garrett, the thing that pops into my mind, I just got back from Sherm National, and there are a lot of different topics right now, but one of the topics is the Great Resignation. And they're talking about, the importance of what you're talking about, retention and the employee experience, and trying to find a way to retain. Like, of course, we know there's a war on talent, so getting talent, but then keeping talent just because what's going on. But one of the things I wanted to get you on the show today also is because when I was talking with Denise, also she talked about some of your experience with retention, and so I was on your LinkedIn. And of course, that's one thing I love about the podcast is that, like you go out and you do your research. And I was reading your recommendations. I'm really always interested in the recommendations and what people say about them. People have just such incredible things that they're saying about you, but really it's your focus on really training and development. So I had one lady talked about Emily is a great coach and motivator for her team. Another lady talked about, she worked with you in the training department, and just her admiration for you as you connected with different people. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, you talked about, you found your lane, I guess, if you will, when you were doing some training. But I don't know, what is it that drives you?
I think you only need kind of one person that's been in your nest, so to speak, to get that big promotion. And, you're the first person they want to call, because they know that I'll be proud of them before it hooks you, before it really, that is such a motivator for me, because they're just so proud. And, if I look back in my career and the folks that have been in my nest, because once they're in your nest, they're always in your nest. If they're not calling you and saying, I just have to share this great piece of news because, I knew that you'd be proud, and it's things that they probably learned along the way during our time together, then I haven't done my job. Like, if I haven't gotten one of those calls in the last 6 months, or, even 3 months, then I'm kind of like, oh, all right, I gotta get down to business and get back to work, make sure I'm pouring into the folks that are going to have futures with me.
But as I read those, though, it's almost like, there's a lot of leaders out there that are very focused on, hey, we got to get the business results, we got to get our profits, our margins in line, we need to get all of this stuff done. But it looks to me like you're very focused on people first.
Well, that's how you get those numbers, right? I mean, not that they're not important to me, because we've got to, at the end of the day, I don't ever want to apologize for being a for-profit company, because that feels
Right.
good too, right?
Right.
But those, if you share with people kind of how you're doing it, and internally, actually, in every company I've been to, we talk about, it feels good as one of our goals. Is it's not just good enough to beat the competition, you got to beat the snot out of the competition. So we have snot talk on kind of how we're doing that and so forth, and that is kind of part of how can you perfect your craft, whether it's your craft in training, our training department, your craft in our marketing department, your craft in our asset management, our investments. How can you perfect your craft, go from ordinary to extraordinary? to beat the snot out of the competition. So, you know, I want them to be fulfilled by what they can do in their own roles. In fact, but also if they're not beating the competition, then they're probably not in the spot that they should be. You know, we will find them probably something else that they can give back to that feeds their soul, but also serves the business goal as well. So yeah, it's people first, but you don't get to those are a byproduct of the practice and the hard sweat. You know, you don't win the games on the court during the game. You win the game out on the practice field. So I think that goes back to what is your passion and how can we perfect your craft, and how can it connect with our business goals.
There's also a lot of talk right now about, and there's always been, but it seems like it's been magnified on the employee experience. Do you and your team put a lot of focus on that employee experience? And is that talent development and what we're talking about now part of that?
Yeah, I think talent development is all, you know, people like to talk about themselves, and they want to know that we're willing to invest in them as well. I will say our onboarding experience is a constant evolution, because I don't think I'll ever stop evolving it, because you know, we've been talking about it for 30 years and it can always get better. Or I'll see something that I'm inspired by a different company. I think that you know, where people are starting their first, you know, who's going to have lunch with me and who do I call, and they've probably gone from being a broker of knowledge in their own, you know, in the company that they worked at prior, to now they're having to stop and ask questions, and just that uncomfortableness and vulnerability. That's very much a part of our daily conversations of like, how are they feeling? You know, how is that person going to feel comfortable raising their hand saying, I don't understand this, or I have a better way of doing this, and having people trust us that, you know, I don't want to have all the answers. I want a whole army of people to say, all right, what do you see it from your seat? What do you see from your seat? And then feel comfortable to trust us with that feedback, so we can kind of always continue to make a better customer experience, whether it's internal customers or external customers. So we do lots of different things, whether it's pulse surveys that they get a couple of questions every week and they can give us feedback. We do annual engagement surveys, kind of just have that benchmark once a year. We have town halls after we get the engagement surveys back. So, and we also have, this is kind of a brainchild last year, but it worked really well. It was Rush Week, and we have all of the different committees that they can sign up for, whether it is the Spark committee, which is kind of the fun committee. We have the policies and procedures, which really is beyond me why people want that one, but a lot of people are interested in the policies and procedure committee. We have the diversity inclusion committee that is really popular. So all of these different ways that they can be our community, so our giving back, living to giving community. So they have different it's truly like Rush Week. So get them kind of plugged in. So it's exciting to get their passion of what they want to do, but really it affects so many other people, whether they're serving on that committee, their employee experience, because all of the committees kind of touch all of our employees. So that's been wildly more popular than what I had anticipated. So that's been kind of a fun ride.
I think the onboarding experience, everybody continues to try to just improve that, right? And because, you know, you read about some of the different organizations, like the brands, like whether it's you know, Zappos or Google, or, you know, where they're doing these big things. But at the end of the day, it's about the little things, right? Trying to perfect that onboarding experience. And if you can get it right from the start, man, it just makes everything just really go. But I love what you talked about, Rush Week, because all of a sudden my mind just went back to college. And, you know, it's a way of saying, hey, look, you know, it's a great engagement. And plus, we're valuing you to tell us what you want to do.
True.
Right. And to get involved and where your strengths at. And oh man, there's so much here. Hey, I want to ask you one other question around this. And that is, you know, for maybe some, you know, you talked about some of your new employees, as well as you yourself, right? Coming to a company, moving to a new company, or whatever the case may be. How do you develop influence in the workplace? Or maybe what tips would you share that has helped you develop influence in the workplace that might help some of the listeners as they continue to try to find their lane in the workplace and develop influence?
I would, for me personally, and I'm an introvert by nature, but it's worked to my advantage is just listening and then really using their words on, okay, this is what I heard you say, and then making changes based on that, and then giving the credit to, Bruce was really very kind and sharing that he thought that our onboarding experience wasn't up to what he's seen in the past. So these are some of the things that we're implementing as a result of his feedback. I think that always goes a long way. I think, when you're actually using the feedback that you have, people end up telling you more because, hey, that worked. She didn't shoot it down. She did something with it. You just kind of immediately kind of get street creds. And then I don't know why this is, but when you ask people for favors, there's some kind of psychological, like, oh, she felt comfortable enough with asking a favor. So getting people involved, but also when you're saying, hey, do you mind doing X, Y, and Z for me? Kind of just gets me a little bit more comfortable. Or I guess they're more comfortable with me after that. That's a little fast track. I don't know. I read it in a book. It was Lions Don't Need to Roar. And I thought, oh, that's weird. That's probably never going to work. And I'll be darned if it doesn't. So, I don't invent things that I don't need, but it is a nice little way to kind of get to know people on a little bit faster basis. When you know that there's things that need to be changed and you got to move a little bit more quickly. That's a nice way to get people involved.
I love everything, everything you're talking about, as I was thinking about, visiting with you and, what could we offer the listeners? And when it comes down to it, a lot of us are talking about, getting talent in the workplace and then keeping talent in the workplace. And everything that you've talked about today is around the employee experience, from onboarding them to getting them involved, and just helping them create more value and influence in the workplace. I just love all that. For someone, let me ask you this as we wrap this topic up. For someone that, you're chief operating officer, you're a high level employee. For someone that says, hey, I want to do what Emily does one day, any tips on maybe a couple of things? Maybe someone's in their earlier mid-career and they're like, hey, you know what? I want to become a better leader. Any tips that you would share that they might think about or that has helped you?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that helped me, particularly in my kind of late 20s, early 30s, when I was, could have gone in a lot of different directions, was I volunteered for everything. I was on the uniform committee. I actually don't recommend that one. That's actually a really horrid. But I was on every committee that they would let me show up to, and it broadened my perspective. I was probably a lot smarter then than I am now. I thought I had it all figured out at that point in my life. But it gave me a lot of different vantage points to be able to look through, and what happened in Dallas, Texas was very different than what was experiencing in our West Coast portfolio and our East Coast portfolio. So it was great for me to really kind of humble me a bit, to show me that there's lots of different ways to the finish line. But it also got me exposed to a lot of different people in the organization. So all of a sudden I had people rooting for me in Chicago and, Atlanta, and all of those people that when you show up on time, when you take notes and you come back to that next committee meeting and you've completed all of your assignments plus some, and then you're helping, other people finish theirs, that goes a long way. So I think it helped both. I learned a ton in that time frame. So I'm not as lucky now to be able to volunteer for as many things as I used to, but every time I do, when you give, you get something in return. So whether it's the apartment association, industry, And I still call on friends that maybe I met on those committees that are working different companies now to say, hey, in fact, had somebody reach out to me today, said, I'd like for my marketing person to team up with your marketing person. Would you be open to it? So it's, that's what I would say is just give as much as you can. You can't let home base take, a second seat. So you got to cover your, what you're actually paid to do on a day-to-day basis first, but every ounce of energy that you can give kind of above and beyond that will come back to you tenfold.
Oh man, I love all of that. Volunteer. And I talk to so many people about getting involved, and I'll say, hey, you need to get involved. And they're like, I want to get involved, but I just don't have time to get involved. And I'm like, you don't have time not to get involved. It will take you to places you wouldn't even dream of. And you just talked about some of the connections that you make, the visibility that you have, whether it's an internal or external. And that when you give, it really is true. When you give, you get so much more, right?
For sure.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. This has been so good. I always like to ask my guests before I go to It's Time to Accelerate, I always like to ask them if they've ever been given any advice. You've given some incredible advice today, but have you ever been given any advice? Maybe it was early with your family or, with your current work today. Like, if you ever been given any advice, it was so good. You just find yourself sharing that often.
My daughter actually will tell you all of my kind of one-liners. She did just quote me on a podcast to say, if you're not going to do anything about it, you lose your bitching rights.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So yeah, be an impact player of, if you don't like the way things is, if you don't have control over it, I guarantee you have influence.
Yeah.
So use your influence to be able to make the case. And, you don't have to get loud about it. Just have a strong argument and kind of data present and use your influence to make a change.
I love that. I've had so much fun. I told you the time was going to fly. We're going to shift down to It's Time to Accelerate. I'm going to ask you a fun few questions as we end the podcast. First one I always like to ask is, would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast?
A book.
A book. Any favorites?
I have lots of favorites. I'm not a big fiction reader.
Okay.
First Break All the Rules actually was one I was talking about another book earlier, but that one probably was one of my favorites because it had little quizzes in there, and one of my favorites. Good to Great, kind of all of the. I'm about to read Impact Players. We read Multipliers as a company, so
okay. So do you have a book club? You said your Multipliers, or is that just a few of your leaders are reading that?
We go through Franklin Covey with all of our property managers, so and assistant managers. So Multipliers is one of those that Impact Players we just bought, and that's what they'll start in September.
Hey, let me ask you this. I mean, you have been doing a lot of things. You've accomplished a lot of things. You've been very successful. What are you grateful for?
My family, for sure. We're a good squad. I'll tell you, we get things said when it needs to be said. And it's just, they make us laugh and belly laugh until it hurts. And, I'm super thankful for the time that I have with them, for sure.
That's awesome. Hey, outside of work, and I know you work a lot, outside of that, what energizes you?
Sunsets.
Sunsets.
Yeah, I will geek out over a sunset picture, even if I don't even know the person on Facebook. Like, I'm like, that's so beautiful.
Right. It just takes you to another place, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. So I
love that.
Give me a good sunset and I'm good for a year.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Okay. So Emily, this is one of my favorite questions as we wrap up the show here. And I love to ask this question. Emily, 10 years older, is knocking at your door, and you're going to go answer that door. What's she going to say to you?
That is a great question. Probably I should have taken more vacations. For sure. There's no honor badges on letting that PTO roll over. So yes, that's what she'd say to me.
Yeah. Isn't that
Go
the
see the
truth?
sunsets. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, you're definitely driving in the leadership lane. I've had so much fun talking with you today. I know that the listeners are taking notes and are going to take some things out of it. If someone wants to connect with you about something you said today on the show, what would be the best way for them to connect?
LinkedIn.
Hmm.
I'm pretty avid on LinkedIn a lot, so I like to read those posts. So yeah, slide into a DM and happy to continue the leadership chat for sure.
Yeah, I love it. And I always like to mention, if you're going to connect with any of our guests and including Emily, be sure and you post right in there that you heard her on Life in the Leadership Lane podcast. It just all of a sudden it starts that trust building. It's like, hey, I have a purpose here. I heard you on the show. You said this, or you talked about Rush Week, and I'd like to talk with you about it more. And so be sure and do that. And I just want to say how much I appreciate you coming on the show and just sharing your wisdom and your perspective, and I appreciate your friendship.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, this has definitely been fruitful for me as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. I cannot wait to share this. I'll talk to you later, Emily.
All right.